Hi, everyone. Welcome to the December 6th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. This week on the podcast, we're going to look ahead to Cigar Mile weekend at Aqueduct. We're going to discuss all of the stakes races on that Cigar Mile card on Saturday, including the future race, as well as the two-year-old stakes races, the Demoiselle and the Remsen, and some of the undercard stakes action. At the end of the podcast, we'll travel out of town to look at a couple of other stakes races, one from Laurel and one from Gulfstream Park. But the focus of this week's show is really on Cigar Mile Day. A lot of nice horses in action, some competitive races with big fields. So looking forward to going through it with you, Craig. How are you feeling? How are things going?
Yeah, things are going well here. I'm actually looking forward to this, getting back to some big time racing this weekend. We had a little bit of it last weekend, but I think we got some really interesting horses coming back this week. Of course, Maximum Security, who we're going to get to and talk about it, is probably the headliner. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Eclipse Awards on this show, especially on the TimeformUS Pacecast, looking back at these races. And I think the last major Eclipse Award that really is left to be decided, or that could really be altered by race results on the racetrack, is in this Cigar Mile with Maximum Security going for that 3-year-old championship. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's go through this Aqueduct card, the stakes races in chronological order. So we'll begin early in the day in race 2 with the Winter Memories Stakes, going a mile and a 16th on the turf, the inner turf course. Assuming these races will stay on the turf, I know they're scheduled to run one turf race today at Aqueduct to kind of test things out because they've been off the turf recently due to some weather in the area. But if the turf race goes okay today on Friday, I would think that they'll be on the turf for these stakes tomorrow. This is a pretty competitive field. I imagine that Sorrentino Lemon, an undefeated filly for Christophe Clement, will take plenty of money, but there are some other up-and-coming runners in this race that are pretty interesting. Where'd you go in here?
There sure are. This is a tough race from a betting standpoint. I was just looking at our speed figures. 8 of the 9 runners ran a speed figure last time out between 102 and 109. And of course, I say 9. There's 12 entered, but 3 are main track only, so I'm ignoring them. But that is one tightly grouped field. I kind of looked through, and the horse I eventually settled on was Tuned. I know she got a great setup last time. There was a kind of a runoff leader, set a really fast pace. But I just really liked how she finished off her race. She went wide. She didn't bother trying to sort her way through traffic. And, she was ridden by Javier Castellano. And he just knew he had the best horse, and he rode her like that. She got a nice 107 TimeformUS speed figure that day. And so she will probably be my top pick in here.
Yeah, this is a race where I made a top pick, of course, because I have to, but it's one where I would really spread in multi-race wagers because I wouldn't draw a major distinction between the top 3 or 4 contenders in this race. Those being, for me, Tuned and Sorrentino Lemon, as well as Shelter Island and Feel Glorious. I did put Tuned on top as well. I don't love her in this race. I'm a little bit skeptical about the speed figure for her last race, not necessarily your speed figure, Craig, but just in general, it's a race where horses have come back to run a little bit slower, whether you're looking at buyers or TimeformUS speed figures. So I always worry about that a little bit, but she obviously is a lightly raced filly with the potential to improve further. If you look back at her debut in France, she was meant to be a good horse. She actually beat Platane, who came over here and was third in the EP Taylor a few weeks ago. So that race was strong, and she just kind of disappointed after that, but maybe she can finally fulfill that potential in Graham Motion's barn. So I do like her. I respect Sorrentino Lemon. My problem with Sorrentino Lemon is she got a very good trip last time in that allowance win at Belmont Park. The pace of that race was very slow, and she was right up on that pace and sprinted home. She's going to have to probably come from a lot farther back in the pack this time. If you're looking at the TimeformUS pace projector, there is some speed in this race, and she's actually predicted towards the back of the pack along with Tuned. So she might have to adapt her running style here. She probably can do it, but do you want to take a short price on that prospect? So this is a race where I'd spread a little bit because I'm not totally sold on the favorites, but I do respect them.
Yeah, I'm with you. You asked my top selection. That's why I started with Tune, but I would definitely go deep in the horizontal wagers here. I mean, not super deep. I'm with you. I don't think we're going to get any huge upset in here. I don't love, they all have a little negatives against them. Feel Glorious is coming out of what looks like a good effort in a grade 2 Sands Point, but I think that was really a pretty weak grade 2 race. You always have to respect Shelter Island. Chad Brown was Shelter Island. She's only 4-1 on your morning line. She ran well, and his horses are certainly able to jump up and run better. But with that only a 102 last time out, it's hard to love her. So, again, I'm with you on this one. I would use the most preferred runners, but I'm not really in love with any of them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've kind of got the same knocks on Feel Glorious and Sorrentino Lemon. Feel Glorious just has had some chances to win recently and hasn't done it. In Shelter Island, she won well enough last time. Chad Brown, though, when he makes this move, moving up to Stakes Company off a debut win, the stats there really aren't great for him, kind of contrary to what you might believe, because he typically is known for doing well with these lightly raced horses, but he typically goes to a nominators of one first, not a stakes race. So that's a bit of a negative for me. But it's a race that I would spread, and as you would agree with that. Let's move on to another turf race that's scheduled for the turf. Again, we'll see if this race stays on the turf. I imagine they're going to try to keep this race on the turf, that being the Autumn Days, the fourth race, because a lot of the runners entered for the main track only situation are also entered back in a stakes race on Sunday. So one of those races will be badly depleted if this race comes off the turf. So we'll see about that. On the turf, I think there's no real question that the horse to beat is Fire Key. She's not the kind of runner that wins all the time. She's got a lot of second place finishes as well, but she always shows up with a really solid effort. She's one of these turf sprinters that just seems to be a specialist at the 6 furlong distance, and she's getting the right conditions today.
She is. She's certainly the horse to beat. I know she didn't pay much last time, but I pretty much had her as a single. I think she draws a different, little bit tougher test in here this time. And, her speed figures haven't been as good lately as they have been, so I'm probably going to take a shot against her. The logical alternative would seem to be Broadway Run. She kind of ran a stinker last time, but she's coming off a layoff, so something clearly probably went wrong that day. If she can get back to her best races, she's certainly going to be the one that would give her the toughest spot. But there's a few others I like in here too. I really liked Rose Flower's last win in an allowance. It was her second start in the U.S. She ran okay first time out, but that second time she was able to overcome a slow pace. She actually came from dead last in the field to get up and win fairly easily. Now, it wasn't the strongest field in the world, but I just like how she did it against the grain, and she got a 106 TimeformUS speed figure, which she would need to improve on a little bit. But, she certainly could in her third start here in the country. And the other horse that I like a little bit at a price is Mentality, the Wesley Ward trained filly. She's just a 4-year-old about to turn 5, but she's one she's not like your typical Wesley Ward that's just all speed. She seems to actually run a little better at these longer distances. She's really like 6 furlongs the last couple times. And I do like that she has a little more tactical speed than Rose Flower does. So while I do agree with you that the top two, Broadway Fire Key is the horse to beat, and I think Broadway Run, your second choice on the morning line, certainly could win the race. I don't think it's just those two. I do like the 3 and the 6 a bit in here as well.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I would definitely use Fire Key pretty strongly in this spot, though I don't think she has to win this race. She's going to be right there at the end. I'm using her in all my exotic wagers for sure, but I think you can get a little bit more value if you look at some of the other contenders. Broadway Run, if you just draw a line through her last race, her form looks really similar to Fire Key. They finished right alongside each other in a couple of stakes earlier this year. Last time out in that Smart and Fancy for Broadway Run, just don't think the trip quite worked out for her because she was wide on a day when they had taken the rails down, which is generally not the place to be on that turf course at Saratoga. They also put blinkers on, and now they're taking them off. She didn't seem to run well with them on last time. So I would take a look at Broadway Run here. And I agree with you about Rose Flower. I think she's a horse that you would definitely want to upgrade a little bit. I know she looks a little bit slower than some of the other major contenders, but you pointed out that she overcame that slow pace last time. She was really impressive. If you go back and watch her final race in France when she won going 7 furlongs in that Prix-Amandine. She just ran past almost the entire field in the final 1/8 of a mile. That's just a really impressive turn of foot that she showed that day. A little bit concerned the 6 furlongs is a bit short for her, but I would probably lean towards making her my top pick here over Broadway Run and Fire Key. The others, to me, you can make cases for them. They're probably going to be prices. I think you actually do make some good points about Mentality. If you're looking for a horse coming out of an allowance race, she's actually run faster than Rose Flower. But I just think Rose Flower has a bit more room to improve. And how can you not like the rider switch? Joao Rosario just seems like he's a really good fit for a horse like her. Let's head on to the Sixth race, the Gopher Wand. I don't think we have to spend a whole lot of time on this one. I was not going to try to beat the heavy favorite Spice Perfection. Made her 3-5 on the morning line. In addition to having a huge class edge over this field, she just seems like the lone speed in this race, and I wasn't going to try to overcomplicate this one.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. We have this as a race with no speed, is labeled as no speed. She's not really a front runner, but she's proven she can run up near the lead and run well. So she's one I'm probably not going to try to beat either. I'm not sure I would even get involved in horizontals with her. I don't remember. I think the Grand Slam starts on this race maybe, but I certainly wouldn't start out that bet singling her to run third or anything. So this is a race I'm not very interested in betting, and I'm curious to see how she runs. Her form doesn't look great, but I thought she ran deceivingly well in the filly and mare sprint. She got a 1:11 TimeformUS speed figure, which seems odd being beat 9 lengths. But Kofefi and Bellafina ran really well in there, and I think she pretty much like you has this field over a barrel.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The real only question for her is, can she get the mile distance? But given the pace situation, I don't think it's going to be a big problem. So let's move on from this race and talk about the final 3 races on this Saturday card at Aqueduct, because I think there's a lot to digest in all of these races, particularly in the 2-year-old stakes, beginning with the Demoiselle race 8 on the card. This is a really wide open affair. You've got 12 horses entered, 11 are supposed to run because I Dare You is expected to scratch. She ran yesterday at Aqueduct. Maydeen seems like the horse to beat, at least from my perspective, because she's just one of these horses that has really been meant to go long right from the start. Mark Hennig debuted her in a 1-mile race. She needed that start, but she took a big step forward second time out. I really liked her win Attempted. I know it wasn't the fastest race in the world, but she just drew off with authority that day. She seems like one of these 2-year-olds that's going to have no problem at all with the 1.125 distance, and she drew a great post position, so I just don't think there's a whole lot to knock about her form in this race.
Yeah, I agree. She's certainly a deserving morning line favorite. I think she is the horse to beat in here. And I don't really have any knocks on here. I'm not going to concede the race to her, but when I compare her to the second and third choices, I just think there's a lot more to like. Alondra, who I think is a second choice on the morning, she's kind of had that reputation since her debut win, and I know she had a little bit of trouble last time out, but I just can't get past it. Her speed figures are so much below the others. She's yet to hit a 90 on our figures. She just seems like kind of a plotter to me, so I'm not saying she can't win. This is a race we have labeled as having a fast pace. We expect it to have a fast pace. She has the best late pace rating, but I'm going to look elsewhere. I can't take a horse like this at a short price. And then we come to Lake Avenue, who I think actually comes in with the highest TimeformUS speed figure last out of 106. But she's yet to go beyond 7 furlongs. She draws the outside post in here, so that's not going to be any great shakes from the 11 hole. I'm not sure she's a horse that really runs like she wants a 1.125. I know she's by Tappet out of a Street Cry mare, but sometimes you got to look at the running style. And really, when I went back and watched that allowance and looked at it, it was only a 4-horse field. There was really nothing in there. She was 1-5 for a reason. So I suspect this one's going to be over bet. So along with your horse, Maydeen, the only other horse that interested me, I kind of mentioned it on my out of the gate segment. If I was going to go with a closer, it would be Critical Value. I don't even know if she's a true closer, but I really liked how this one's progressing for Jeremiah Englehart. Her speed figures improved each time. She ran really well when stretched out to a mile first time. And I like how she adapted to the slower pace and was still able to rate off of it and really finish her race. So if I take on Maydeen, it would be with her. I think she would be a better pick than the second and third choices on the morning line.
Yeah, regarding the horse you mentioned first, Alondra, she's got a very similar profile to a horse that we're going to talk about in the Remsen next. That's probably also going to be a relatively short price. I know Alondra is a horse that is very popular. People are looking forward to her turning out to be a nice one for Shug McGahee, and it's no surprise because usually when Shug McGahee sends out a horse that wins its debut, they turn out to be stakes horses. So, I mean, it's no coincidence that she's got a lot of hype surrounding her. It's just she didn't really deliver last time in the Alcibiades. I know the trip was a little weird, or they took her way farther back than you would have expected. She was running on at the end of that race in British Idiom. Yes, she's going to be the 2-year-old champion and all that. But she does have to run a lot faster to beat this field, and I don't want to take a short price on a horse in that circumstance. I'm willing to bet a horse that's got slower speed figures if they're a bigger price, but that's not the case with Alondra. I agree with everything you said about Lake Avenue. She's coming out of a race that to me is pretty suspect. I love her pedigree. Her damn 7th Street was a grade 1 winning router. She was just a really nice horse for Godolphin, but she's got to prove it. And this post position, even the 11 hole going a mile and an eighth at Aqueduct is just, I mean, it's almost impossible for a 2-year-old with speed to win from that post position. I actually like Jeremiah Englehart's other horse, the number 10 Daphne Moon in this race. Daphne Moon just feels like a horse to me that really fits the profile of this race and how the pace is likely to set up. The pace projector is predicting a fast pace. I don't really want to argue with that because you've got horses with speed like Lake Avenue, Blame Debbie, Miss Marissa, even a horse like Hara could go from the middle of the pack. So I think Daphne Moon's going to get some pace to close into. She definitely needs it, but I liked her debut at Saratoga. It's always tough for a first-time starter to win going 7 furlongs. I thought she did it nicely. I don't think she really had a chance to show what she could do in the Frisette last time because while the pace seems like it was honest, that Frisette was just basically a merry-go-round race where nobody did any closing from the back of the pack, and she was kind of behind horses in an uncomfortable spot for most of the race, taking kickback. Just didn't think it was the right trip for her that day. I think she's going to have more time to kind of uncoil that big stride of hers going the mile and eighth distance, and I just like her stretching out with a little pace in the race. So I think both of these horses for Engelhart are going to be prices, and they might work out the right trip. So we'll see how it shakes out in the Demoiselle, but definitely a race where I think you can find some value.
All right, David, I think we have our first Andy Serling like lunch bet here with the Engelhart trainees.
I agree with that because I'm not too keen on yours and maybe you don't like mine. So we'll check in on that next week. Moving on to the Remsen, I think I can predict how you're going to feel about one horse in this race, that being Forza Dioro. I had trouble making a line for this race. I think Forza Dioro is probably going to be the favorite, but this is the kind of horse that you probably don't want to be betting at a short price. There are reasons to like him, and we'll get to those, but just based on speed figures, he's a lot slower than many of the other contenders in this race, and a lot of those horses are going to be much bigger prices than him. So what did you think of Forza Dioro?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. We both kind of said the same thing in the last race about Alondra. And, it's the same way. I don't have any problem, even as a speed figure maker, betting horses with lower figures, but I just can't do it at short prices. And I agree with your morning line here. I think this horse has a reputation. It's a Bill Mott horse. People expect that the longer he goes, the better he's going to get. But that's quite a jump he's going to have to make. So I just can't take a lower price on a horse like that, and I'm definitely going to look elsewhere. We have this labeled as a race without much speed, the opposite of the Demoiselle. And looking through the PPs, a smaller field, it's a little tough to argue with that. It's not really easy to figure out who's going to go for the lead in here. The horses we have up front on the pace projector are horses that have never really led. So I'm curious what you think about that and who you came up with in here.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much to make of that pace characterization because it's a little hard to predict who's going to make the lead because none of them are really front runners. I mean, we've got Shotsky on the lead. I mean, he's shown tactical speed in his races. I mean, the other horse that's predicted to be up close to the pace of Men's, he's been a stone cold closer in his races. So, I mean, it's a little bit hard to predict. Frankly, I know Forza Dioro is predicted to be towards the back of the pack. He showed a lot more early speed last time when he broke better, and he was so far out of it in his debut. So I think it's hard to kind of create an early pace rating for a horse like that that's had two such dichotomous running styles in his races. I don't think he's going to be on the leap. I don't think he's going to be so far out the back of the pack. It's just pretty hard to predict. I agree with your assessment of Forza Dioro. The reasons to like him, obviously, are that he blew the start in his debut, and he won last time under a hand ride very easily. So you might think he could run faster than that if he was really set down. We'll see if that ultimately turns out to be true. But this is a competitive race, and I think you can make a case for some of the bigger prices. Just to touch upon the two Todd Pletcher horses briefly, at least from my perspective, I don't love either one of them. If I preferred one, I'd probably prefer Alpha 66 because his debut, he was slightly against a rail bias that day. I thought he ran well to win, and then he was off slowly in the Champagne last time. Distance is a question for him, but I like his style a bit more than Chase Tracker, and I think he might be up close to the pace early. So we'll see how that plays out. He was the one I preferred of the two of those, but I actually like a price horse in this race, that being Prince James. I've got him at 15 to 1 on the morning line. If you're looking at buyers, he's way too slow. If you're looking at the TimeformUS speed figures, he's probably still a little bit slow. What I do want to say about his debut, though, is that the 95 TimeformUS speed figure they earned for that race, it doesn't put him totally out of this because it's not like the top contenders in here are running some type of massive speed figures. And that day he beat this horse called Brother Brad by about 3 lengths. And who did Brother Brad finish second to last time? Well, Forza Dioro, the favorite in this race. So that form line actually translates pretty well. And I know his figure dropped off last time in that Churchill Downs allowance race, but that race was dominated on the front end. The horse just got loose and ran away from the field. Nobody really did much closing in that race. So I think Prince James didn't run as badly as it seems. I like that they're getting ambitious with him with the blinkers on. I'm not going to be surprised if he's closer to the pace this time. And at a price, I just think he could outrun his odds and offer some value in this race.
Okay, I did want to talk about a couple before. I actually settled on Shotsky in here. I don't think it's not because of the pace projector, because I'm not basing that on any kind of he's going to be on the lead. I just like how he was able to overcome that, not overcome, but he tracked a moderate pace last time against a pretty good field. I think he might like the 1 1/8, and it's more about price. I'm with you. I'm looking for a price in here, because I really don't like the favorites. The other horse I wanted to mention was Informative. He comes in with a big figure at Laurel 111. I think it's one we talked about on the pace cast, and I said it was a very tough figure to make, but I checked the times because there was such a disparity between some of the other 6 furlong races on the card, and it came back legit. So that horse did get the best figure. He has the best figure in the field last race. But he's also stretching out from 6 furlongs to 1 1/8, and that's just not something I'm interested in. Whether the figure turns out to be accurate or not, he's not a horse I like. So, as I said, just because I make speed figures, I'm not a guy that's always going to gravitate towards the top speed figures, and he's one I'm not interested in at all.
Yeah, I agree with your take on Informative. I'm not going to knock your pick of Shotsky. I mean, I think there are some things to like about that horse. I question the pedigree for him to get the distance a little bit, but I mean, look, he's got a couple of triple-digit TimeformUS speed figures in his last couple of starts, and that's more than a lot of these can say. And if he's on the lead here, I mean, that's probably not going to be a bad place to be. So I've got no problem with that horse. And I do think this is a race where you can get a little bit creative because the favorites, they just look a little bit dicey, and don't take too short of a price on a horse like Forza Dioro. Let's move on to the final race we'll discuss from Aqueduct, and that is the feature race on the Saturday card, the Grade 1 Cigar Mile handicap, going the mile distance, 1 turn over the Aqueduct oval. And the concentration of talent is really right towards the center of this field, with Maximum Security in post 5 and Spun to Run in post 6. Basically, on paper, it looks like a match race between these two horses because they've run a couple of speed figures in their last few starts that just make them faster than the horses in this field. And they're both supposed to love this 1 mile distance. Do you think it's between these two? And if so, which one do you prefer?
I did. I do think it's between those two. I looked at this race long and hard, trying to get creative. I wanted to make a case for Whitmore, but I just can't at a mile. And as you said, they're just faster than the rest of the horses. And for me, it just came down to 2 things. One is value. I think they're very evenly matched, so I'm going to side with Spun to Run. And the other is just the post position. I actually think him being outside is going to be just a little bit of an advantage over Maximum Security. He can kind of lay right off of him, take it to him whenever he's ready. So I give him a slight edge in this field. I think he really showed some versatility last time out in that Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And I think he's still probably going to be a little underestimated compared to Maximum Security at the betting window. So that's the direction I went. If I were playing horizontals, I'm going to use them both. I'm not going to get knocked out of a horizontal ticket because I left Maximum Security out. But if I have to pick one, it's going to be Spun to Run.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, really. I did pick Maximum Security in this race. I believe it's the first time I'm actually doing that because, as you know, I've been no big fan of this horse for much of the year. But I've got to say, he's finally won me over. It's taken long enough for sure. But he's just so good and so versatile. I mean, he can really adapt to any kind of pace situation. He seems as effective going 7 furlongs as he is going 1.25 miles. So this 1 mile distance, even though he hasn't done it before, seems like it should be absolutely perfect for him. And I'm looking at this TimeformUS pace projector, and it shows Maximum Security on the lead. And I can't really argue with that because you look through this race beyond the 2 favorites, and it's not like there's a ton of speed signed on here. I mean, maybe True Timber is a little aggressive from the outside under Joe Bravo, but I mean, if he doesn't go, then it's really just a match race between Maximum Security and Spun to Run. And the reason that I'm picking Maximum Security, it's more of a question of the trip that Spun to Run is going to work out, because typically you would say, oh, it's good that he's drawn outside of his other pace rival. But I do want to note that Spun to Run, that race that he wanted Parks 2 back, while he ran a gigantic speed figure, especially in terms of the final time, the pace of that race, I mean, it wasn't really competitive, and he kind of did have some things go in his favor that day. And then last time out in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, again, I don't want to detract from his performance because he ran another really fast speed figure, but that was a race that appeared to have a lot more speed signed on than actually developed on the racetrack. And he got a pretty easy lead for him in a race where some others that were supposed to be up front were ridden a little bit more conservatively. And being out in front, not dealing with any kickback that weekend at Santa Anita was definitely where you wanted to be. So Spun to Run might have to deal with just a bit more adversity this time, facing a horse like Maximum Security. And to me, he's got to overcome that, and I want to see him do it. Whereas Maximum Security, as I was saying, I mean, he's already overcome adversity multiple points in his career. So I think Maximum Security has the slight upper hand here, but I don't want to draw a major distinction between these two. In multi-race bets, I'll use them both. I'll just press Maximum Security probably as my only A in this race.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I said, it's splitting hairs in my opinion. I am really curious. The one thing I'm going to be watching is how aggressive Irad Ortiz is, because he was actually really aggressive in that Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, kind of surprisingly. And I think that's the reason he got the lead. It kind of forced some others to back off. He may not take that same tactic in here, knowing he would have to outrun Maximum Security. So I think how he rides this horse is going to be really interesting to watch.
Now, in terms of possible upsetters, maybe there just are none, but was there anybody else in this race? I mean, I know you mentioned Whitmore, but any others that you think maybe have a chance to get in there, or you're just kind of looking for horses to round out the trifecta?
Yeah, like I said, I just kind of looked through the field. I guess if I had to come up with one, maybe Pat on the Back. He went a little bit too far last time. I was against him the time before when he ran a really nice race to win the Kelso, and it seems like a mile is probably a distance that's right up his alley. So if you force me to pick another horse, it would be him. I really couldn't make a case for anyone else in here.
Yeah, my exotics horse would probably be True Timber. I love the mile distance for him, and I think he's slowly been rounding back into form since coming back from the layoff. He ran so well in this race last year, so I'll use him probably mostly in trifectas. Maybe I'll use him under Maximum Security in the exacta. Let's move on to the final two races we're going to discuss on this podcast. Those two out-of-town stakes, one from Laurel, that's where we'll begin. This is the Howard and Sandra Bender Memorial, going 6 furlongs. And for a $75,000 stakes race, this actually drew a pretty nice field. It's hard to say who really is the horse to beat because it's a very evenly matched group. The horse that probably ran the best last race is Taco Supreme, who you cleverly picked last time in that Maryland Million Sprint. Do you want him back in this spot, or do you think he just got the right setup last time?
You know, I think this is one as a better. You just really got to wait and see. I'm not sure I trust the morning line in here. I don't see Still Having Fun as being the favorite in this race, coming off of just some awful looking morning lines. I know he's a first time gelding, but he's been away a while. So, I mean, I do like Taco Supreme. He could easily win this race. He has figures that match up really well. But, you know, it just depends. This is one I got to watch for value. I do like his versatility. He kind of came from way back last time, which was a bit of a surprise. He's usually a horse that likes to run right up on or near the lead. And he showed he can kind of adapt to the race and do what he needs to do. So I do think he's a strong contender in here. The horse I'm a bit definitely against, along with Still Having Fun, who I don't get that morning line at all. I know he has some past races and some back class, but I'd have a hard time taking a short price looking at those running lines, first time gelding or not. But the other one is Lewisfield. He just doesn't seem to win anymore. He's a horse who always gets bet, and he's one I just can't take anymore. He keeps finding ways to get beat. He lost the Taco Supreme 2 back when he had a good trip and looked like he was going to give it all. And then last time he didn't really run a step at Penn, went in against Firenze Fire. Granted, Firenze Fire's a better horse than he is, but the rest of that field was pretty weak, and he finished way back. So if he's one of the choices, as he usually is, I'm against him.
I actually like Lewisfield in this race, so we could do another lunch bet here, maybe. I picked Lewisfield in this race. I don't have a problem with Taco Supreme. I kind of think Taco Supreme is the horse to beat. I also agree with your assessment of still having fun. If he is a short price, I don't want him at a short price because his form has just not been great, and his one big win came with just one of the best pace setups that you'll ever receive in that Woody Stevens from last year. So I'm a little bit against him. I think there are some things to like about Lewisfield in this race. Maybe he's not the same horse that was running those big speed figures from last winter anymore. I get that. But his race 2 back in the Maryland Sprint, it wasn't bad. He was a little closer to the pace than Taco Supreme was, and that was a pace that sort of fell apart at the end a little bit. And he was kind of trying to come through inside, whereas I thought Taco Supreme was a little bit more with the race flow coming on the outside. And the other thing about Lewisfield is he's not a horse that wants to be coming from way off the pace. And I think that he's gotten into some races with a little bit more pace in his recent starts, kind of worked against him because he does better when he can be up close to the pace and sort of take it over around the far turn. I don't see that much speed in this field. I mean, I know Showalter has some speed, and the 10 Oldies But Goodies has a little speed as well, but it's sort of cheaper, less classy speed. Among the main contenders, I feel like Lewisfield is going to be positioned ahead of all of them early. And last time out in that race at Penn National, it's really worth watching because I think Lewisfield was going to run a big race that day, and he just got totally steadied on the far turn and shuffled out of position. That finish 6 by 9 lengths is not nearly as bad as it looks. I feel like he's going to be a decent price in the race off his recent form, and I have some faith he can turn things around. I know his form looks a little bit dubious, but if he's a price in this spot, I definitely want to take a shot with him. The other horse I think you have to mention is Always Mining. His form also has gone a little bit south, kind of like still having fun, but Always Mining at least has multiple big speed figures to get back to. Do you think the turn back and distance might work out well for him?
I kind of looked at it for him as more of a prep. I know he won at shorter distances early, at 7 furlongs a few times. But, coming off the layoff, I think he's a horse they probably have a little more in mind for. It wouldn't shock me if he won, but I wasn't a big fan of that one coming off the layoff. If I was going to look at one other horse, I really did like Clubman's race last time. He's an old veteran. He's 5, but it seems like he runs all the time. I don't know how many career starts he has, but it's got to be up there. But he actually turned back in a 6 furlong race in the slop last time and actually overcame a slow pace from well back and got up the win easy. Obviously, it was against lesser horses, but he got a nice 114 speed figure, and he seems to be rounding back to form. He's a horse who can run near 120 TimeformUS speed figures when he's right. So he would be my alternative to Taco Supreme in here.
Yeah, I've got no problem with Clubman. I think he's one of these horses where if we just isolate his sprint races, he's got nothing but speed figures that put him in the mix. So I would definitely use him in exotics behind the horse that I picked on top. Let's talk about the final race on the podcast this week. It is the Claiming Crown Jewel from Gulfstream going the 1 1/8 on the main track on their Claiming Crown card on Saturday. This race gave me a big headache because, you've got a horse in Laytone, the number 5, who's coming off a speed figure that if he repeats it here, he's going to crush this field. However, he did that in gate-to-wire fashion, and there's just a ton of speed in this race that's either going to get ahead of him or keep him really honest on the front end. So I'm a little skeptical about whether he can run back to that big figure.
Yeah, I am as well. We have it labeled as a race that's going to be fast-paced. You're always... it's always a guessing game, really, with these Jason Service horses. It wouldn't shock me if he ran another 120 and just ran away from the field early and won by 5 lengths. But he's going to be a short price. In a race like this where you have horses who probably aren't really worthy of running for $200,000 in just a regular stakes race, very rarely do you get away with an easy lead or the pace is almost always fast in these races. So I'm going to agree with the pace projector in here that thinks it's going to be fast. And I look towards a couple horses that like to come from off the pace. The first one was Third Day. He's the 2 horse in here. He's not a deep closer by any means. He has good tactical speed. He ran a nice 110 in an off the turf race last time. In a race that had a moderate, the slow pace. It was really slow early, kind of moderate through the middle. And I thought he looked good that day. And then I go to the outside, which is always a little tricky going a 1 1/8 at Gulfstream. But if the pace is hot as expected, I think Noble Thought is a horse who could just kind of drop in, get a good position, and finish well for Mike Maker. He's a guy who really knows where to spot his horses, and I think he found a good spot with this one. He's actually the one I'm going to go with on top in here.
Yeah, this is one of these races where I can't really argue with any pick at a price because a lot of horses can win this race. One thing I do want to note about Laytone is that if you isolate his recent dirt races and kind of ignore the turf races, he's been in really good form. It's not just the last race that makes him a possible winner of this race. Even going 5 back to that 12-5 claiming win at Belmont, if you want to watch a race where we often say that horses couldn't have run a lot faster just because they're geared down at the end. If you want to watch an example of a race where a horse could have run a lot faster when he was geared down at the end, watch that June 16th race for Laytone, because I don't think it's a big exaggeration to say he would have won by 30 lengths if they hadn't kind of stopped him to a walk at the end. So he might have a couple of those 120-ish TimeformUS speed figures if they had ridden him out that day. So I do think Laytone is very talented. I just question the trip he's going to get. And like you, I want to look for some closers in this race. I mean, I have no real problem with the two that you mentioned. Third Day, I like him going a little bit shorter, but he does have that last race that makes him a contender. Noble Thought, I can't argue with him either. The one that I landed on was Ectobar, first off the claim for Jorge Navarro. I mean, that angle alone is enough to like a horse, especially at a price. And he's got some speed figures going back on the dirt at this 1.125 distance that make him pretty intriguing here for prior trainers. They tried him on turf at some ridiculous distances a couple of times. That's not really what he wants to do. He's more of a dirt horse. And I think if you just isolate those dirt races, he makes a lot of sense here. I don't want to hold that last race at Saratoga against him too much because he's somehow kind of gotten to a bad spot in the 5-horse off the turf field. He's better than that. And I think it's a good sign that they picked him up for just $25,000. And now they're immediately moving him up into a stakes race. For a guy who is known for winning off the claim. I think those are all good signs. So I take a shot with Ectobar. Don't know if we're going to get 10-1 on him, but I think anything in that kind of 6 to 8-1 range would definitely be fair on that horse.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting race. It caps off their big day at Gulfstream. I think there's one more after, but it's the highlight of the card. And it's always good to see these claiming horses get a shot at the big money. And I always watch these. I don't always watch Gulfstream this time of year, but I'll certainly be tuned in Saturday as there will be a lot of good stories among these. And usually they're really good betting races. So I'm sure I'll be putting some money through the windows on them as well.
Yeah, there are some nice races on that card. I was even briefly checking out the race right after that, the turf version of this Claiming Crown race. And there are some nice horses in there that I'm sure you'll be familiar with if you follow any of those top circuits that are coming up from Claiming Company into Stakes Company. So we'll watch those races, and we'll definitely focus on those races from Aqueduct, particularly the Cigar Mile. We'll recap all of that on the TimeformUS Pacecast next Tuesday. But for now, thanks for listening, guys, this week. As always, you can check out both podcasts, the TimeformUS Forecast and the TimeformUS Pacecast on drf.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and SoundCloud. Wherever you get your podcasts, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel and give us a listen. Thanks for staying with us this week, and we'll be back on Tuesday.